everyone, and welcome back to your favorite podcast. I'm Emma, and I'm here with my co-host, Mike. Mike, how's it going today?
I'm doing great, thanks. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited you're joining us today. So, let me ask you, have you ever tried to understand an English conversation and felt, well, completely lost?
Yeah. I think we've all been there. You're listening, you're nodding along, and inside you're just like, what on earth are they saying?
Exactly. So today we're diving into listening in English. It's not just about hearing words, it's about really getting what's going on. We're going to share some fun stories, a few techniques, and hopefully help you make listening a little less, confusing.
Right. And we'll also talk about those little aha moments we all have when something finally clicks. So grab a coffee, relax, and let's get into it.
Key phrases.
All right, so before we go further, let's break down something pretty important. Emma, have you ever thought about the difference between hearing and listening?
Oh, definitely. It's actually kind of funny because a lot of people think they're the same thing, right? But they're actually super different.
Totally. So here's the deal. Hearing is just the physical act of sound hitting your ears. It's passive, like you could be hearing music in the background without really paying attention to it.
Exactly. It's like when you're in a busy cafe and you can hear people chatting around you, but you're not really focusing on what they're saying.
On the other hand, we have listening. Listening is different. Listening is active. It's about focusing on the sounds, making sense of them, and understanding the message. It's, more intentional. You're really engaged, trying to pick up on everything.
Right? So when you're listening, you're putting in the effort to understand. You're not just hearing sounds. You're actually, making sense of the words, the tone, and all those little details.
And that's the big difference. Hearing is automatic, but listening takes focus. And active listening, especially, is a skill that really helps us communicate better and sound more natural in conversations.
All right. So let's talk about why listening is such a game changer when it comes to sounding, more natural in English.
Why listening is crucial to sounding natural.
Yeah. You know, great listening isn't just about understanding. It actually, affects the way you speak. When you're tuned in to how English really sounds, it's like you start picking up on those little things that make a huge difference.
Exactly. I like to think of it like tuning an instrument. If it's out of tune, well, it's not going to sound right, right? So, listening helps you tune your English so it sounds more like what native speakers are used to.
That's such a good point, Mike. And, listening in English is kind of like solving a puzzle. You've got all these pieces, tone, intonation, context, and they all come together to give you the full picture.
Right. And when you start to hear and understand these pieces, you're more likely to respond naturally, even if you're not totally fluent yet. It's like you're getting clues from the way people say things, not just the words they're using.
Yeah. And this skill is, so useful in real life. Like, think about catching a joke. If you miss the tone or the way it's delivered, you might not even realize it was supposed to be funny. Or, following directions, where each word counts. So, now that we know why listening is so important, let's talk about some simple techniques that can, make it easier to understand English.
Listening techniques.
Absolutely. We've got 3 great techniques for you today, and these can really transform how you listen. Let's start with the first one, chunking.
Right. Chunking is basically breaking sentences down into smaller parts, or chunks. Instead of trying to understand a long sentence all at once, you focus on one small part at a time.
Yeah, so for example, if you hear, I went to the store to get some milk and bread, you can break it into, I went to the store to get some milk and bread. This way, each part feels more, manageable.
It's like taking a deep breath in between phrases. It really helps make the sentence less overwhelming. All right, next up is shadowing, which sounds kind of mysterious, doesn't it?
Haha, yeah, it does. But shadowing is pretty simple. You just repeat phrases right after you hear them. So if you're listening to a sentence, you wait for a pause and then, mimic the speaker's rhythm and tone.
Exactly. It helps you get used to the natural flow of English and, how native speakers use emphasis. It might feel strange at first, but it's actually a great way to build your confidence.
And finally, we have noticing stress and intonation. English speakers emphasize certain words to convey meaning. So instead of trying to catch every single word, focus on which words seem stronger or louder.
Yes. For example, if someone says, "I really can't believe it," you'll notice that "really" and "believe" are stressed. Those words carry the main feeling. Paying attention to this makes it easier to follow the heart of what's being said. All right. So let me share one of those big aha moments I had. So picture this. Back in high school, I had this close group of friends, and we were always up to something. There were pranks, little parties, typical high school fun. One day, we were all hanging out after school, just laughing and talking about all the wild stuff we'd gotten into that year.
Yep.
So we're sitting around, and someone brings up this prank we pulled on our teacher. We had, left a note on her desk, pretending it was from the principal, asking her to go to the office right away. The teacher looked so confused, and we were all cracking up behind her back.
Aha. Classic high school prank.
Right? So we're all laughing and sharing different stories. Like that time we tried to crash a party at a neighboring school, and how we almost got caught sneaking back in. Everyone's talking over each other, sharing their own side of each story, and I'm totally keeping up at first.
Yeah.
So there I am, laughing and nodding along, but then someone throws in another story. A memory I barely remembered. It was about this ridiculous Halloween costume one of our friends had worn, and suddenly they were all laughing and shouting about that night, going back and forth, just piling on details. And that's where I just, got lost.
Uh-huh.
It was like the conversation took off without me. I couldn't keep up with who was talking, and every story just blended into the next. I'm there, trying to look like I'm following, but in my head, I'm like, what are they even talking about now?
Go on.
I'm sitting there, smiling and nodding, but inside I'm totally out of the loop. Finally, they start talking about a prank they wanted to pull on our friend's dad, and I'm just trying to catch up thinking, when did we even get to this part?
Uh-huh.
Near the end, someone mentioned that Halloween night again, and I realized they were still talking about that prank-filled night and all the costumes people wore. It was like my brain finally connected the dots, and I could jump back in and actually laugh along for real this time.
What an experience, Emma.
And, this experience kind of reminds me of the importance of listening. Sometimes, even if you know the language, you can still feel totally lost when conversations move quickly, or there are lots of details. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, just like I did back then.
Right. It's like listening takes practice, especially when there's slang, jokes, or cultural references that can throw you off track.
Yep.
3 pro tips for better listening.
So, tip number 1. Listen for meaning, not words. This is a big one. When you focus on the overall meaning instead of every single word, you get the main idea faster and don't feel so, overwhelmed.
Totally agree. It's like watching a movie. You don't pause to understand each line, right? You just, follow the story.
Exactly. It's all about letting go of the need to catch every detail and just trusting that you'll get the bigger picture. You're, less likely to get lost that way.
Love that. Now, tip number 2, embrace the unknown. This one's tough but super helpful. Sometimes you'll hear words you don't understand and, well, that's okay. Try to accept it as part of the process.
Yep, it's kind of like letting those unfamiliar words just float by. Don't let them trip you up. Instead, see if you can guess the meaning through the context. Like if everyone's laughing, it's probably, something funny.
Exactly. And last but not least, tip 3, practice mindful listening. This is about finding a quiet spot, taking a few deep breaths, and focusing solely on what you're hearing. Maybe even close your eyes and really tune in.
I love that one. It's like setting aside a moment to just listen without distractions. You'll be surprised at how much more you pick up when you're fully present.
Yep. And these little mindful moments can be really powerful, especially if you're practicing with a native speaker or even listening to a podcast. Just let your ears do the work. All right, so let's go over some common mistakes people make when they're listening to English. These are the things that can really throw you off if you're not aware of them.
Oh, definitely. One of the biggest mistakes is fixating on every word. I think a lot of people feel like they need to catch every single word to understand the conversation, and honestly, it can be exhausting.
Yeah. Trying to get every word can make you miss the main idea completely. It's like you're zooming in so close that you lose the big picture.
Exactly. It's much more helpful to focus on the overall meaning rather than stressing about each word. And speaking of stressing, another big mistake is getting hung up on fast speech. English speakers can, sound like they're just blending all the words together, right?
Yep, and that can be confusing. Words like gonna instead of going to or wanna instead of want to can make it feel like a whole different language.
Exactly. So instead of trying to break down each word, it's better to, listen to the flow. If you know gonna means going to, then you won't get tripped up every time you hear it. Another mistake? Assuming you need to understand absolutely everything. It's okay to let a few words go over your head.
Yes, totally. I mean, even native speakers don't catch everything. Sometimes it's just about catching enough to understand what's being talked about.
Exactly. And if you miss a few details, don't stress. Just focus on staying in the conversation. The main point usually, shows up again.
So, to recap, don't fixate on every word, don't let fast speech overwhelm you, and remember, it's okay to miss a few words as long as you're following the main idea.
Yep, that's it. It's about staying calm and, trusting yourself to get the big picture.
Tip of the day.
All right, so it's time for our tip of the day. And today, it's all about creating a listening habit. Even just 5 to 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference in your listening skills.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be anything fancy either. Just setting aside a few minutes to focus on listening can really add up over time.
Exactly. So here are some ideas. You could start your day with an English podcast, something short and manageable. Or maybe you listen to music with lyrics and try to catch the meaning.
I love that idea. And if you're more into news, you could listen to short clips from news channels. Even just a quick update can help you get used to English sounds.
Definitely. And try to fit in some listening practice during daily routines, like when you're on public transport or waiting in line. You can tune into announcements, or even just listen to people chatting around you.
That's a good one. Real-life scenarios like listening to travel announcements, ordering food in a noisy restaurant, or following along with a YouTube tutorial are super realistic ways to improve.
Yep. And here's a quick tip for each scenario. If you're on public transport, pay special attention to numbers and place names. In a restaurant, focus on the main items being said. And if you're watching a tutorial, try to catch key steps or actions.
Such great tips. It's all about being mindful and making listening part of your daily routine.
And remember, it doesn't need to be perfect. Just keep showing up, and little by little, you'll notice the progress. Before we wrap up, I just want to say, if you're working on your English skills, keep going. Improving your listening isn't always easy, but it's so worth it. Every time you practice, you're training your ears, your mind, and honestly, your confidence in English.
Totally. And remember, listening is one of the most powerful ways to sound more natural and comfortable. It's like building a bridge between you and the language. You start to hear things you might have missed before.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to dive in, even if it feels challenging at first. Just take it step by step, and remember that every minute you spend listening is helping you get closer to fluency.
Yes, thank you. And if you found this episode helpful, we'd love for you to give it a thumbs up or a 5-star rating, depending on where you're listening.
Absolutely. And hey, if you have any of your own listening tips, or maybe some challenges you're facing with English listening, we'd love to hear about them. Just leave a comment or review. We're here to help each other improve.
Yep. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any future episodes. We've got lots more to share, and we'd love for you to be part of it.
So, until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, you're making progress every single day. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.